World leaders at the G7 summit have promised to put more pressure on Russia to end its war in Ukraine. Donald Trump says he'll do what he can to stop the fighting and urged Russia to make a deal. Lars Halter from Deutsche Welle joins us now from Berlin. Lars, g'day. So what's the current mood like at the G7 meeting?
Yeah, how you doing? It's good to be with you. Well, as is usually the case at these large summits, everyone is working very hard to put on their friendliest face. Everyone is very optimistic, very excited about moving the world into the right direction. But it is really hard this time to find anything backing up this kind of optimism. Now, what makes this summit really special is how Ukraine was technically top of the agenda, but how that was obviously derailed by US President Trump and his still somewhat mysterious peace deal with Iran. There are still no hard details on that. As we just heard in your previous report, there are some details out there, but not at the level that G7 leaders would have wanted to hear them. There are still so many questions on the Strait of Hormuz. People do want to know more about the future of the strait. But Trump at the summit in the town of Evian by a beautiful Lake Geneva didn't really let out anything other than his usual somewhat fuzzy description of great things happening. So this already made for a somewhat awkward opening with lots of talk, not much substance, all while it is impossible not to see how G7 leaders are looking to build new alliances. They invited Brazil, India, Kenya and South Korea to Evian for talks. They're even calling the initiative Forging New Partnerships, and it's clear that during the presidency of Donald Trump in the US, the alliance has been weakened and that everyone is looking for new impulses and a new direction.
And with all the talk about Iran going on, will G7 leaders still prioritise Ukraine during the summit?
They do. They are talking about Ukraine, and they actually will continue to do so today. But it all wasn't easy, as evidenced again by US President Trump, who initially said that, and I quote, "You know, now that this is finished, we're going to be focusing on that," meaning switching from Iran to Ukraine. However, then later in the day, he did make it clear that Ukraine just isn't a priority for him at all, saying, "We have nothing to do with it. We just sell them weapons." All he offered is to bring back sanctions on Russian oil so as to financially weaken the aggressor. And stricter sanctions on oil and gas are indeed on the list of things G7 leaders have agreed on. Furthermore, they have promised to support Ukraine in aerial defense. But especially after Trump's comments, it very much sounds like the financial burden remains on the other countries. And they've also pledged to continue to support Ukraine with supplies of diesel fuel, natural gas, gasoline, especially if the war would extend into yet another winter. Now, that's obviously a scenario that nobody wants. So the G7, including the US, also said they want to push Russia towards negotiating and signing a peace treaty with Ukraine. However, there is no timetable for that, and it's entirely unclear how this will actually play in Russia.
And Ukraine is also at the centre of another debate, this time within the European Union. What can you tell us about that?
Indeed, the EU has officially restarted talks with Ukraine about that country officially joining the 27-nation bloc. Ukraine joining the EU has actually been applied for a while, but for the past 2 years, the initiative had been sidelined by Hungary. It's just now, after that country elected new leadership, that their blockade is off and talks are back on. Now, in this first real round of negotiations, they're talking about Ukraine's judicial system, the protection of fundamental values, and security. So this is a generally well-structured process, and candidate countries must demonstrate that their legal systems and their border controls meet EU standards. After that, the EU and Ukraine will discuss further reforms, for instance, in the area of anti-corruption measures. After all, the bloc wants to ensure that all the members, including, of course, the new members, adhere to certain standards, and that there will be an even playing field within the group. And I do say new members as a plural, by the way, as Moldova is also in discussions with the EU, those talks running parallel to Ukraine's talks.
OK, Lars Halter there in Berlin. The government has downgraded its travel warnings for several countries in the Middle East because of the new ceasefire agreement. National tourism reporter Christy Sexton-McGrath is in Cairns.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong has issued